69 days have passed since Nancy Guthrie went missing. The culprit who abducted her, invading her Tucson area home in the Catalina foothills, sabotaged the porch camera before kidnapping the 84-year-old during the early hours of February 1st, remains unidentified without any psychological profile linked to their name. Nothing has been shared publicly. A former FBI agent is now speaking out, demanding to know the reason. First, understand that everything presented here stems from confirmed public documentation, official recorded sources, and verified police statements. Nobody mentioned in this story has been formally charged regarding the disappearance of Nancy. We deal in facts. These difficult questions simply must be asked. Let's examine what the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit actually entails. If you've tracked this investigation from the start, you've heard them mentioned. However, the massive scale of their work and their potential impact is worth considering before discussing why their silence here is so unusual. Known as the BAU, this specialized unit operates from the Virginia FBI Academy in Quantico. They represent a branch of the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, or NCAAVC. These investigators don't patrol the streets. They crunch the data. They study human behavior. Detectives across the country contact them to grasp not just the crime scene details, but the type of person responsible and their underlying motivations. The BAU avoids guessing. They rely on analysis, and those two concepts are worlds apart. Whenever the BAU creates a suspect profile, they synthesize every scrap of evidence gathered by the field investigators. Forensics, physical clues, and witness accounts, video surveillance, plus the crime's geography, the specific timing, the equipment, the tactics, and the obvious level of planning behind the entire operation. They filter all this through behavioral science and decades of established criminal records. Their output is far more than a simple artist's sketch. It's a psychological blueprint, detailing the specific individual likely to commit this exact act in this exact way at this location against this target. And that psychological blueprint is something the community can actually utilize. Here is what many people fail to understand about a behavioral profile. It isn't mainly focused on appearance. Security footage already shows how they look. That's already known. A profile reveals what a camera cannot. It exposes the true nature of the person, their recurring habits and how they function in their daily life, their likely social interactions and relationships, their probable job, and if they knew the victim. It tells us if they're locals or if they traveled to that specific area, if they worked alone, and whether they planned this for days, weeks, or even months, whether the specific methods used, the gear they brought, and the entry point chosen reflect a seasoned offender or someone who is simply winging it in the moment. Such information shifts how the public evaluates the potential leads they are currently holding. At this very moment, certain individuals are holding on to crucial pieces of the puzzle. People who have an unsettling gut feeling about someone in their inner circle. Folks who witnessed an odd quirk or action that seemed insignificant back then. While a generic physical sketch might look like it could apply to just about anyone, a behavioral breakdown could lead someone to recognize a person they actually know. That is the true impact of the BAU's expertise, as seen in hundreds of past cases. This team has stepped into high-profile investigations that have become household names nationwide. Yet they also work quiet, under-the-radar cases that rarely make a ripple in the news. Getting their help has never been about how much media attention a case receives. The real deciding factor is whether the psychological trail is strong enough and if a profile would help the public provide the missing links. When it comes to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, the behavioral clues are overwhelming. They are beyond significant. One veteran FBI special agent, a woman who spent her entire career in that world, went on the air to state she cannot fathom why that data hasn't led to a public profile. Her name is Maureen O'Connell. Maureen isn't some media pundit or a retired local cop looking for a television career. She served for 25 years as a special agent with the Bureau. Between 1991 and 2014, she was part of the Evidence Response Team, the ERT, meaning she was on the ground at the country's most intricate and difficult crime scenes. She knows what properly processed forensics look like and how to build a narrative from physical clues. She is intimately familiar with the internal mechanics of how the Bureau gathers data and how specific units access and distribute that vital intel. When she questions the absence of a behavioral profile in this specific matter, she isn't just making a casual observation from the sidelines. This is coming from an expert who knows precisely how the investigation ought to be moving and is pointing out that the current path doesn't add up. O'Connell spoke on Brian Enton's program about the essential components of a criminal profile. She listed the requirements: any fingerprints found, DNA samples, statements from the first officers on the scene or neighbors nearby, insights from the family regarding Nancy's daily life, and the forensic recreation of the home, including how the killer entered and escaped. All of those factors, she explained, are what the BAU analyzes, and none of them are missing here. In Nancy's case, it's all been logged. The data points are there, so O'Connell is asking why the final result hasn't been shared. She is urging you and your listeners to contact the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit to ask why a profile of this individual hasn't been released. She isn't accusing the authorities of any kind of negligence or foul play. She isn't suggesting that the integrity of the case has been compromised. She is raising a much more specific concern regarding the standard operating procedure. Looking at the wealth of information available and considering everything confirmed by both the detectives and the family, why hasn't a psychological profile been given to the public who are searching for this woman? That is the specific question she is putting on the record today. Let's look at the facts we have gathered so far, because they are vital. We are not just dealing with scraps of information here. The psychological footprint is massive. Consider the importance of January 11th. The authorities have zeroed in on that specific night in January 2026, exactly 3 weeks before Nancy vanished on February 1st. Police requested that Catalina Foothills residents scan their security feeds from that specific window. Even the Guthrie family put out a press release on March 21st, identifying January 11th as a critical moment for the public to look back on. Their message stated, "We are asking everyone to rack their brains, particularly regarding the time frame of January 31st into early February 1st, along with that late night on January 11th. Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County suspects a prior incident occurred then, following the FBI's review of digital findings. However, both Google, who first flagged the timestamp, and local law enforcement admit the precise day isn't ironclad based on imagery by itself. The department officially noted that claiming those photos came from different periods is, to use their term, purely conjectural. What is not up for debate is the intensity of the search itself. Detectives do not canvass an entire community for footage 3 weeks before a crime happens without a solid lead. The Bureau's tech team pointed them in that direction. The family highlighted it in the media. That specific date holds serious weight for the detectives. Psychologically, this suggests we are dealing with someone who is not acting on a whim. If that January date indicates a scouting mission, whether it was that exact night or that week, it reveals a calculated predator, a person who staked out Nancy's house, learned her schedule or the area's layout, and then came back 21 days later to strike. This kind of preparation gives the behavioral units a very clear profile of their subject. Moving on, let's break down the actual events of February 1st. The Pima County Sheriff provided a minute-by-minute account. Her porch camera was cut off at 1:47 a.m. By 2:12 in the morning, a different sensor registered movement. At 2:20, the app for Nancy's heart regulator lost contact with her mobile device, marking the likely abduction window. That leaves a 41-minute gap between the lens going dark and the heart device going quiet. 41 minutes where Nancy Guthrie was confronted in her own living space. Veteran detectives and crime scene specialists reviewing these times note that 41 minutes is an eternity in these situations. This was not some panicked, fast-paced home invasion. This was an intruder moving with chilling precision, someone who was not in a hurry or who had specific tasks to complete inside. It points to a cold, focused intent. Now, about that light source. Video from the FBI shows a masked figure with a flashlight clenched in their teeth, a tactic meant to keep both hands available while lighting up the dark. This matters for 2 reasons. Primarily, it is a gold mine for biological evidence. Crime scene specialists, including Professor April Stonehouse from Arizona State University, have stated that any saliva left on that torch would be a goldmine for DNA evidence if found. Another point to consider is what it reveals about his habits. Clenching a light between your teeth to free up both hands is a move usually seen in tactical or high-stakes settings, like surgery, emergency services, the police, the armed forces, or private security. It points to someone who knows how to navigate the dark while keeping their hands ready for action. Moving on to the entry points. While speaking with Hodoki on the Today Show late this March, Savannah Guthrie noted that when the family showed up at the residence on the morning of February 1st, they discovered the rear entrances had been left wide open. According to her, which is a crucial detail, the relatives first assumed that EMTs had entered through the back during the night. The interior looked so undisturbed that it seemed routine. Nothing was broken. The doors were simply standing open. The house itself was reportedly in perfect order, with no evidence of any fight, per an insider cited by News Nation reporter Brian Anon. Ashley Banfield, another journalist, shared a different piece of the puzzle, mentioning police sources who claimed the yard gate and doors were held open by the homeowner's very own planters from the porch. The intruder used her decorative ceramic pots to wedge that screen door back. Just to be clear, the Pima County Sheriff or the Bureau hasn't verified that specific part yet. However, the relatives have corroborated that the entrances were definitely rigged to stay open, suggesting a very deliberate entry through the rear. Looking at the psychology here, the intruder clearly had enough layout knowledge to head straight for the back. This person was already planning their escape. They were hedging their bets and prepping for trouble, not just looking for a way inside. Making sure the way out was clear is a hallmark of a calculated, tactical mindset. So, let's look at the big picture. Detectives are looking closely at a visit 21 days before she was taken. There is a 41-minute gap from the moment the lens was covered to when the heart monitor stopped. We see a suspect holding a light in his teeth in the videos the Bureau put out. The rear doors were left open in a house that looked untouched, and we have a masked man described by federal agents as roughly 5'9" or 10 inches tall with a medium frame, wearing a pack and a sidearm, who vanished into the dark with an 84-year-old lady. This constitutes a pattern of conduct, a clear trail of choices made by an actual individual who targeted a living, breathing victim. The profiling unit has everything they need to sketch out this killer, even if they haven't shared that profile yet. The Bureau likely has several strategic reasons for keeping their psychological analysis under wraps for now, and it makes sense to explore those possibilities fairly, instead of assuming their quietness is a sign of trouble. One major factor is that going public might tip off the perpetrator. If the police are already zeroing in on a suspect or have someone in their sights, revealing what they know could lead that person to switch up their routine, dump evidence, or skip town. Keeping things close to the vest is vital for a live case. Often, the authorities are sitting on far more information than they admit, and their silence is usually just as calculated as their press releases. Another angle is that the case has reached a point where going public might actually blow a few active trails. Maybe a key observer still needs a proper sit-down, or some lab work is pending, or perhaps they're still tailing someone. Police often keep things quiet to avoid showing their cards too early. Those are all fair tactics in a manhunt. These are the exact protocols Maureen O'Connell understands deeply after 25 years with the Bureau. She isn't brushing those facts aside. However, her take on Brian Enton's show was pretty striking. Even considering those hurdles, she argued, this radio silence makes no sense, since the crime's patterns are distinct enough that a public profile would likely trigger a flood of leads. When someone goes missing, especially an 84-year-old lady gone for over 2 months, you can't treat clues like a bonus. Every lead is a vital pulse. They've got data on the perpetrator that could be shaped into a targeted sketch to get the public looking in the right direction. So, why the holdup? Nancy Guthrie was 84 when she vanished from her Catalina Foothills residence near Tucson on February 1, 2026. She had a life and a home of her own, and the individual responsible for her disappearance remains at large, flying under the radar without any public trait description that might ring a bell for someone in their circle. O'Connell is focusing on that aha moment. It's about when a close contact, maybe a neighbor, a colleague, or a relative, reads a description and things finally click. That instant they realize, wait, that sounds exactly like so-and-so. But that spark never happens if the profile stays locked away. O'Connell stressed a crucial detail. The profilers don't need a specific person of interest to build a sketch. Even hardcore true crime fans often get that part wrong. Experts draft these behavioral maps well before anyone is named. That's the whole goal, giving everyone a blueprint of who to watch for, so when a name pops up, there's a solid benchmark to measure them by. The sketch sets the stage. Finding the person comes second. So, claiming the police are waiting for a suspect before going public is completely flip-flopped. Profiling doesn't work that way. You construct the image based on how the crime was committed. The profile itself is the tool to locate them. Regarding Nancy, the facts are already on the table, including the official interest in someone scouting the area previously. We already know about that 41-minute gap in the timeline. The Bureau even put out video showing the intruder holding a light in their mouth. Those unlocked rear doors point straight toward a calculated move. All the ingredients for a profile are sitting right there. This is exactly why a former federal agent who spent decades piecing together these psychological puzzles is going on record to say the lack of transparency is baffling. We won't wander outside the established facts, but we can definitely break down what the solid proof tells us about who we're looking for. Take a look at the exact proof O'Connell mentioned, and let the facts tell the story. The police are zeroing in on a potential scouting trip to the Catalina foothills, precisely 21 days before the kidnapping took place, which reveals a lot, even if the specific timing isn't totally locked in. It suggests that detectives are convinced the suspect conducted heavy surveillance, carefully mapping out the property well before they ever made a move, mulling this over for weeks leading up to February 1st. This shows the mindset of a meticulous planner, a remarkably patient individual, someone capable of sticking to a strategy for weeks without making any reckless moves. In the world of profiling, that level of foresight points to a very specific personality type, methodical, objective-driven, and able to stay cool to ensure the best possible outcome. Using a flashlight held in the teeth is a behavioral clue of a different sort. It points towards someone comfortable in high-stakes tactical settings, suggesting a background involving training where light is needed but both hands must remain free. Only a handful of professional fields actually utilize that specific technique as a standard. Think surgeons or emergency medical technicians, police officers, soldiers, rescue crews, or high-level security teams. This indicates a deeply ingrained habit, not just a one-time choice. The 41-minute window for New York's kidnapping shows incredible emotional control. Most people breaking into an occupied house would experience a massive rush of panic, pounding heartbeats, clouded judgment, and a desperate urge to get out fast. Staying inside for nearly 40 minutes and leaving the place looking spotless suggests an individual seasoned in high-pressure operational environments, or someone naturally wired to stay ice-cold under the most dangerous conditions. Leaving the back doors wide open as a pre-planned escape route tells detectives how this person functions during a mission. They were actively managing every potential problem in real time. They were already prepared for what to do if the main plan failed. That is tactical flexibility, the ability to pivot while sticking to the primary goal. Now, look at the whole picture. A disciplined strategist who spent weeks preparing the groundwork. A person deeply familiar with professional tactical gear. Someone who maintains total composure when the stakes are highest. An actor who covered every exit. Who stalked one specific woman and carried out a scheme that required teamwork, restraint, and nerves of steel. That is a psychological sketch, not just a label. Not a photo, but a profile of a living human being among us today. And O'Connell is saying that someone out there recognizes this person. She's baffled by the silence because the clues already paint a very clear image. It just hasn't been officially packaged and released as a formal suspect profile yet. 69 days have passed since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her house in Catalina foothills. Let's review exactly where this probe stands now, as the situation has evolved quite a bit lately. Those who have been tracking this story since the very start deserve a clear breakdown of the facts versus the remaining mysteries. Pima County deputies are running the probe with heavy backing from the FBI. Sheriff Chris Nanos has served as the main spokesperson for the search. The Bureau provided their specialized crime scene evidence unit, lab resources, tech analysis, and a $100,000 reward fund. A wide range of different departments have been pulled in, including Border Patrol agents along with search and rescue teams. At the peak, about 400 investigators were assigned to the search. Here are the officially confirmed facts as of day 69. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished from her foothills home near Tucson, Arizona, during the early hours of February 1, 2026. She was last seen on January 31st when a relative dropped her home. By February 10, 2026, the FBI put out security video showing a hooded, masked individual at Nancy's front entrance. Agents described a suspect, maybe 5'9" or 10", average build, with a sidearm and a 24-liter Ozark trail pack. That video even showed the person biting down on a flashlight at one point. Official logs from the sheriff's department show the camera was cut at 1:47 a.m. The software picked up movement again at 2:12 a.m. Nancy's heart monitor stopped syncing with her phone at 2:28 a.m. That leaves a 41-minute gap from the blackout to total silence. Lab tests confirmed the blood on her porch was indeed Nancy's. DNA found at the scene didn't match the victim or her close circle. That genetic material has been sent out for a deep forensic study. Police mentioned that contaminated samples are making the results take longer. The rear exits were found wide open, per Savannah Guthrie's recent interview. No one has been charged, and no suspect has been publicly named. No behavioral profile has been shared with the community. Those are the hard facts. Now, a veteran FBI agent with 25 years of experience, including over 2 decades on the Evidence Response Unit, someone who knows the investigative process inside and out, is asking why. Her question isn't just a figure of speech. It is a procedural critique based on the fact that the BAU was built for this, to turn psychological evidence into a public asset. One thing O'Connell pointed out, and it is a point that really resonates, is that a profile isn't just for cops, it is for everyone. And given the massive national attention on Nancy's disappearance, the public is already fully invested. They are watching. They are looking for holes in the story. They are flooding reporters like Brian Enton with tips and strange observations. What they lack is a psychological framework to interpret what they're seeing. Think about that for a second. There are residents all around the Catalina foothills. People nationwide have been dissecting the security footage since the very beginning. Folks who have been reviewing the suspect's visual traits, and quite a few of those individuals are currently harboring a hunch about an acquaintance. A nagging doubt that hasn't blossomed into a formal report because they can't quite explain why they feel that way. They see the bodily characteristics shown in the video and might remark, well, that could honestly be just about anyone. But if they were given a psychological blueprint, if they could study the traits of a person who plots for weeks, who utilizes specialized tactical gear, who functions within a residence for nearly 40 minutes with enough self-control to leave it spotless, they might identify the culprit not by a masked face, but through their distinct personal habits. Because that is the core purpose of a profile. It is not intended to take the place of visual identification. It provides a secondary tier of recognition, a behavioral signature that can trigger folks who possess information but haven't yet grasped that their knowledge is actually important. Take a moment to think about the logic behind that. A visual description can be linked to anyone sharing specific features. Height, stature, estimated age. In a major city, that pool of candidates is massive. However, a psychological sketch is different. A behavioral outline reveals how a person thinks, their method of planning, how they handle intense stress, and their specific professional background. That list of potential matches becomes significantly smaller. And most importantly, it targets the very people in the perpetrator's inner circle who are best equipped to spot those traits. Consider who is truly most likely to. Notice that a friend meticulously and patiently maps out their moves over several weeks. Who would know that an associate has a history involving the use of professional operational equipment? Who is most likely to have observed that someone they know has an incredible capacity for remaining calm in high-stakes moments? The answer is those closest to the suspect, the colleague, the person next door, a relative, or an acquaintance who has seen those specific personality traits across many different situations. These people find it much easier to connect a behavioral pattern to someone they know than a vague physical sketch, because they've watched those actions firsthand. They have been living right next to it. And if that psychological outline were released to the public, if it were precise and based on the forensic data that investigators have already scrutinized, it would give those people a way to explain the gut feeling they already have. That is the identification trigger O'Connell is trying to highlight. The breakthrough moment when someone close to the killer reads the description and everything finally clicks. The second they realize that sounds exactly like someone they know, that reaction cannot be sparked if the profile is never shared with the community. O'Connell understands this dynamic from first-hand experience. She has worked cases where a psychological sketch led to the tip that finally solved everything. She knows the system works, and she is watching an investigation with clear behavioral clues, verified evidence of habits, yet she is not seeing that strategy being utilized. That is the source of her confusion and her worry. She spoke on television to state this publicly because she believes the community has a right to know that this tool exists, that it applies to this specific case, and that it has not been switched on. It is worth looking back for a second at the background of how the Bureau adopted behavioral analysis because it directly addresses the gravity of what O'Connell is asking. It was during the 1970s that the Bureau truly began diving into psychological profiling. Trailblazers like Agents Howard Tatton and Patrick Melanie led the charge, merging clinical psychology with the grit of active, violent crime scene investigations. This approach saw massive growth and fine-tuning across the 1970s and 80s, thanks to legends like John Douglas and Robert Ressler, who carried out exhaustive sit-downs with imprisoned violent criminals to establish the hard data behind modern criminal profiling. The Behavioral Science Unit, founded at Quantico back then, served as the primary hub for these specialized operations. Today's Behavioral Analysis Unit, or the BAU, is the direct successor to that legacy. Evolution didn't happen in a heartbeat. The Bureau didn't just wake up and embrace psychology and detective work. It required decades of raw data gathering, along with endless official and casual dialogues with those behind bars. They spent years crafting systems to pull practical, high-value leads about a suspect's identity from the physical remains of a crime. Progress demanded the agency realize that fingerprints and DNA were just one piece of the puzzle. Understanding the how behind an act reveals far more about the perpetrator than just the what ever could. This long-term commitment eventually gave birth to a comprehensive methodology, a roadmap, and a toolkit for detectives nationwide to decipher the psychological footprints left at a scene and identify their target. The BAU doesn't actually step in and seize control of a case. They provide the insight. Their job is to interpret behavioral clues and turn them into clear information that cops and the community can actually act on. This specific interpretive skill is key here because shifting from physical proof to character sketches doesn't just happen on its own. It is a deliberate, complex transition. It demands deep scrutiny. It calls for the exact skills the BAU was created for. Once that insight is shared with the world, the entire atmosphere surrounding the search for the suspect shifts. It empowers ordinary citizens to offer more relevant help. It helps those who might know something realize that their minor detail is actually the key to the case. Why does this history matter? Because the BAU was born from the realization by U.S. law enforcement years ago that the psychological trail a killer leaves behind is just as vital as any forensic evidence. Seeing a flashlight held in someone's teeth proves more than just their presence in a dark room. It offers a window into their habits. Propping a door for a quick getaway shows more than just a physical action. It reveals how that individual's mind works when the stakes are high and they are on the clock. The total sum of these small choices forms a behavioral fingerprint of the culprit. The Bureau spent decades perfecting a whole department dedicated to mining that data and weaponizing it against criminals. We have those experts ready for this investigation. What Maureen O'Connell is really getting at is whether these resources are being used to get vital information out to the community. Given the origin and purpose of this specialized team, failing to release a profile for a case this rich in clues is not just confusing, it is alarming. The quiet is deafening, especially considering how much noise the evidence should be making. Maureen O'Connell clearly senses that absence of sound. She spent her entire career working in the building housing that specific division. Aware of their potential, she's publicly arguing those vital resources aren't reaching the people who need them. This lack of information might actually be intentional. Detectives could have specific motives that remain hidden from the public. Yet, a veteran FBI insider is coming forward to state that she simply doesn't understand the delay and is demanding a public explanation for it. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old when she vanished, a detail we cannot ignore. That specific fact is the heart of this entire mystery. At 84, a person's physical toughness is nothing like it was at 30, 40, or 60. Savannah Guthrie mentioned her mom might reach the mailbox on a good day, but usually couldn't. Her back caused her constant agony. She used nightly hearing aids and required a strict schedule of daily prescriptions. Sheriff Nanos confirmed that missing a dose for 24 hours could easily turn fatal. The longer an elderly person stays missing, the more dangerous their physical state becomes. In this investigation, the clock is the enemy. Every sunset that passes without finding her, without a major breakthrough or a lead providing answers, brings consequences far beyond the police work. Nancy is a mother and a grandmother to people who miss her. She led a meaningful life. She kept a home full of thriving plants and followed her daily habits. She is deeply loved, yet has been missing for 69 days. If a psychological sketch could spark just one useful tip, if one person recognizes the kidnapper's description and calls the bureau, if there's a single moment where someone suddenly realizes, I know a person who fits this, it could provide actionable data of immeasurable value. That's the goal O'Connell is chasing when she speaks out and asks the hard questions. Not just the formality of seeing a report published. It's about the harsh reality that Nancy is still lost, and every possible search tool should be fully active and visible. O'Connell didn't just voice her concerns and walk away. She targeted a specific group. Speaking directly to the viewers on Brian Enton's program, she urged them to contact the bureaus, profiling experts, and demand to know why a suspect analysis hasn't been shared yet, asking every single listener to get involved. She wants the public to contact that behavioral unit and ask why they haven't. Provided a suspect profile, pushing the conversation through the official channels available to everyone. Here is her exact position as she gave it on the record. The Bureau needs to issue a profile just as they've done for hundreds of other investigations. They possess crucial data concerning this criminal that could be used to help the public narrow their focus. Why is it being withheld? They certainly know every fingerprint that was recovered from the scene. They know about evidence they're keeping secret and have the ability to piece it all together, collaborate to draft a sketch that hints at the truth without spilling it. She's urging everyone to reach out to the FBI's behavior experts via formal channels that demand an official reply. We're talking about a very precise and intentional plea, not some vague nudge for heat, but a targeted appeal. Get in touch with the Bureau, raise the issue, file it formally so they can't ignore the submission. The tip hotline for the FBI is currently active. That system was built specifically so citizens could assist with ongoing police work. In this scenario, O'Connell argues that civilian help shouldn't just be about identifying people. It needs to involve scrutiny of the actual procedure, demanding to know why a proven investigative method used in hundreds of previous cases remains unused here. You can see those hotline digits right there on your screen. The link for their web reporting site is visible right now as well. For those tracking this story who feel, much like O'Connell does, that a criminal analysis should be out by now, go ahead and use those tools. Push for an answer through the specific pipeline that mandates a response. This isn't about picking a fight with federal agents or local deputies. O'Connell isn't trying to be difficult. She's a veteran who dedicated 25 years to the federal service. She's speaking up because she knows the authorities could do more for Nancy Guthrie than what they've shown. Her goal is to get the community involved, provided they have the necessary details to recognize what they're searching for. She's taking action because an 84-year-old lady has vanished. Every available resource to locate her needs to be fully operational and out in the open. That's the situation at day 69. A former federal investigator, a verified expert, a broadcasted message, a sharp inquiry, and a clear call for people to act. If you've been on this journey with us, you realize that even the smallest detail counts. Every official inquiry put on the record is significant. Whenever a qualified specialist goes on air to pose a very specific, pointed question to a government body, it matters because it leaves a paper trail they can't brush off. Maureen O'Connell has now made that formal inquiry. The Bureau has yet to put out any behavioral analysis for the Guthrie case. While Pima County deputies lead the charge, the FBI is providing backup. Both groups have reviewed evidence suggesting a specific 41-minute time frame, including government-released clips of a person of interest handling tactical gear, and clear proof of a calculated strategy for entering and exiting the scene. The data points needed for a profile are sitting right there. O'Connell, a quarter-century veteran of the Bureau, with over 20 years on the crime scene response squad, says the lack of a public profile is baffling. She wants the FBI to explain why they're quiet. She's calling on all of you to join her in seeking those answers. Nancy Guthrie is 84. It's been 69 days since she vanished. We won't stop tracking this. We're going to keep demanding the information that's still missing. If you're watching and have any scrap of info regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, the Bureau's tip line is waiting. The digits are flashing on your screen. If you've stuck with this mystery and want to stay updated on every new lead, hit subscribe. That's the quickest way to stay in the loop for every single update. Every verified detail and each breakthrough as this inquiry unfolds. Unsolved mysteries remain, and we won't quit until the truth surfaces. This film is for educational use and utilizes a range of open-source records, official police files, and validated reports from journalistic agencies. Maureen O'Connell is presented here as a former federal investigator, drawing on her professional background and previous appearances on Brian Enton's News Nation's special investigative segments. Anyone featured within this program who hasn't been charged should be viewed as innocent of all allegations. Local Pima County detectives lead the search for Nancy Guthrie with federal support. Detectives from both units are still investigating. The official phone lines and digital portals mentioned during this program are standard tools managed by the Bureau of Investigation. The psychological profiles discussed in these segments are derived from O'Connell's expert analysis and documented evidence found in police files alongside vetted information from reputable news organizations. This project stands alone, without any ties to the Guthrie household, the Pima County Sheriff, or federal authorities. If you have tips regarding Nancy Guthrie, please contact federal agents at 1-800-225-5324 or their online portal. As the investigation stands today, the truth still feels just out of reach. Close enough to sense, yet hidden behind layers of silence and unanswered questions. Each new clue sparks hope, only to deepen the mystery moments later. For those who have followed every twist, this is no longer just a case. It's a relentless search for justice. Someone, somewhere, knows more than they've ever admitted. And until that final piece falls into place, the story isn't over. It can't be. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, everything will change.